Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us for Her Story in the Making. This is episode 5. Where did the time go with all this? And I am so incredibly excited to have not only an icon in the fantasy football world, but somebody who's in Hollywood, somebody who has such a diverse background and an incredible story, Julia Papworth. Julia,
Hi.
how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing? You are very kind with your words. You are very kind.
You know, I don't lie, so it's all very genuine.
That's smart.
I
That's
think
sweet.
that you're amazing. We talked a little bit before the show. I just love the way that you carry yourself. I love the way
Mhm.
that you have confidence in this space, and I really do love your story.
Oh, thank
You
you.
know, we normally kind of start out the show with getting to know how you got into football, how you got into fantasy. But I think that your story is a little bit more unique than everyone else because your parents moved over here from England. So it's not
Yeah.
like, my dad who grew up watching football in the States, like your parents moved over here and you started watching football with them. Did your family know anything about football when they moved over here, or did you guys kind of learn about football together and like learn as a family?
They knew nothing. They knew nothing. And they came over, and I remember my dad telling me that they started watching just all American things, right? Like American sports. And they just became fans of whoever was significant at that time. So, like, they were big 49ers fans. They moved over in 1980. And they were also like Detroit Pistons fans in the NBA, which I was like, that's kind of sort of funny. But if you look back on like who was doing really well, and yeah, we just started watching it on Sundays as a family. And every Sunday, I would sit there with my dad, and my mom would be like doing stuff in the kitchen, but she'd still be like paying attention and whatnot. And that was what it was. We just watched football together every Sunday. It was fantastic. Yeah.
I think that's so funny that you mentioned the Pistons because the Pistons were like the 80s, early 90s reality
Right.
show
God, I love that.
of I
Yeah.
feel like the Pistons were the first reality show of the country. You never knew what was going to happen. I feel like it was semi-scripted in the fact that they were going to just like cause a scene
Yeah.
with
I love
whatever.
I love them. I mean, I know this is an NFL podcast, but they I remember like everything about them. And my husband's son is 8 years old, and we were talking to him about who Dennis Rodman was. And I was like, you have to see. So I'm pulling up all the videos of him in the 80s, and just it was an amazing team like for those few years. It was definitely an amazing team.
And
But
so,
yeah.
yeah, no, it was crazy. But you guys, so you say that you guys were 49ers fans
Yeah.
because was that because you guys moved to Arizona and
Yeah,
the
it's
Cardinals weren't
funny.
exactly like the team there and the 49ers were like the most next closest
Yeah,
relevant team?
that's what I think it was. I'm an Arizona Cardinals fan, and it's been a long, tough road. It's been a horrible, horrible, tough road. At least we got rid of Cliff
My
Kingsbury.
condolences to you
Dude,
about this
we're
season.
cleaning house. That's the thing. We're ripping it down to the studs, but we need to do it. But yeah, I think my dad was just like, yeah. And then he was also like, I like San Francisco. That's a good city. That's fun. And so yeah, doing that growing up. And then I started becoming more of a Cardinals fan just because like as I got older, I was like, oh, okay, our team sucks, but yay. And yeah, I married a Niners fan. He's a diehard Niners fan. So when we have the NFC West games, it's always quite contentious. He had a much better year this year than me. So
Well,
there's
you win some, you lose some. At
exactly.
least there's a
Exactly.
rebuilding year coming up
Exactly.
with
And
all the moves.
when the cards are out, I'm always rooting for the Niners. So yeah,
It's
how do you not root for them right now? It's
it's
good stuff.
yeah, it's so I have a very contentious relationship with the Niners because I'm a Cowboys fan
Oh, you're a
and
Cowboys fan.
yeah, I know, I know. And so
Good
like the
books.
80s and
Good
90s,
books.
yeah, but the 80s and 90s
Yeah.
were, you grew up to hate the Niners,
Yeah.
but I think that they are the best team in the entire NFL.
It's
The
all come together. It's the whole package. That's the thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. But I kind of want to talk about, because like I mentioned earlier, you have so many different life experiences. So just so many.
Yeah.
Um, you went to school at ASU, which
Mhm.
is a very fun school, so I've heard.
Rebels,
Um,
yeah. Yep.
were you already playing fantasy at that point, or did the kind of football atmosphere at Arizona State kind of put you into that, or how did you even involve yourself in first playing fantasy football?
Well, I kind of got into it. I was bartending at the time, at like a local restaurant, and the first fantasy league I was in was there was a couple bartenders and my bar back was running it, and it was him. It was a couple other servers, some random people, and that was the first league I was in, and I am still in that league. And none of us live in Arizona anymore, I don't think. I think there's someone like living in Germany, someone in New York, like we're all over the place. And I don't think any of us have changed our screen names in the like 15 years it's been, which is utterly hilarious. And yeah, that's the thing that is so cool about fantasy is like it sort of it spans time and space in a weird way, right? Like we as soon as we get on there to draft and on that Yahoo platform that no one wants to leave, it's like we're talking the same shit to one another like we're 23 years old. It's so cool. It's really really cool. And then you got to find out, who's who's had a baby, who's gotten married, blah blah blah. And yeah, and we just keep doing it. It's cool. It's really cool.
It's such a fantasy is such a good way to keep in touch with
Yeah,
people that you really haven't spoken to in a long time. I am still in a law school league that
yeah,
they just
really
reached out to
cool.
me. Somebody left their league and they're like, "Hey, you went to school with us. We have
Yeah.
some vacancies. Do you want to be in this league?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to." And then I
Mhm.
got reconnected with like some of my friends from law school that I haven't spoken to in 10 years. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really a very cool part of fantasy, that it does just still bring people together. And like
Yeah.
you said, the shit talk,
It's
gorgeous.
It's fabulous. It's like I remember in Matthew Berry's book, like he was talking about it and talking about how no matter what, like no matter how different you are with like religion or beliefs or politics, if you start talking about fantasy, that's it. You have something in common and you can talk about that. And I love that. I love that.
It's absolutely agreed. You guys in the comments, if you guys want to ask Julia any questions that I don't get to, feel free to drop some questions in the chat. We would love to answer them. But we kind of mentioned law school.
Mhm.
You share that in common with me, that we both went to law school. But then you also have this really, really cool story about being a union member in Hollywood. Can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit
sure.
about that and
Yeah.
how that came about?
Yeah. Well, I started law school at ASU because it was so weird. Like all of my friends were going to law school and I was like, that's what I do. I just guess I do that. And I figured out pretty fast that it wasn't what I would be passionate about. So I was like, well, I better cut my losses here and move on. I had no idea what I was going to do, no idea. And I was bartending at the time, and I remember I went to a movie with my dad. My mom was in England visiting family, and I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I quit law school. And my dad goes, have fun telling your mother. And I was like, okay, great. And he asked me if I knew what I wanted to do, and I go, I have no idea. I have no idea. And the guy I was dating at the time, he's like, you should go to hair school. You've always been good at that. It sounds pretty interesting. And along the lines of what we were talking about before with like bartending and getting older and stuff. And I was like, I just need to have something to focus on, like somewhere to go forward. And I was like, done. I'll go to hair school. And I really liked it. And I had always wanted to move to LA. I'd always wanted to move to California, get out of Arizona. You're from a small town. It's the same sort of thing. You're like, just get me out. I've been with the same people for my entire life. And I was like, oh, I can do this. This is how I do it. I'm going to move to LA and I'm going to do hair on movies and TV shows. And it's going to be like that. And so I did. Like, I just did. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And moved out, like, barely knew one person. Ended up living with one guy that I knew in like high school who needed a roommate. And we ended up living together for like 6 years. He's the best roommate ever. And I started working in a salon, and then I just started working on non-union films and shows, and started to figure out how to like save my days and do all this stuff to get in the union. And after a few years, managed to be on a film that got me in, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been, I think I've been in the union for 10, 12 years now or so. So yeah, it's a very interesting journey, and I love it. I love what I do.
That's so incredible. As a person who is completely inept with doing hair and makeup, very envious of that, especially doing other people's hair and makeup.
It's fun. Yeah, it's a good time.
But not only did you do like all these other shows, but you did The League,
I
which
did.
which is like the fantasy football show.
That was a dream. So a colleague of mine was pregnant, and so she was the department head on the league, and so she was taking a year off. And I was friends with a makeup artist, and she called me and she's like, "Hey, do you want to interview for this?" And I was like, "Yes, 100% I do." And got that and did a season of that filling in for her. And that was just so much fun. Like, those guys in general are hilarious. Like that whole troop of guys, and Katie as well. Like, it was just, we laughed all the time. And it's nice to be on a set like that where you're just laughing. Comedy is super fun. But I love fantasy football. And it was so funny because like the two girls, the two makeup artists, they were like, "We could care less." And I was like, "But it's Mike Evans. We have Mike Evans here." And they were like, I don't know
Who
what
is
that
that? I don't know him. Like pulled the
Paul
Mariah
Scheer
Carey. I
is.
don't know him.
Sorry, Kevin just wrote Paul Scheer is a national treasure. He is a national treasure. Yeah, so that was super fun. So yeah, we had it. We did a fake combine, and it was the year that Mike Evans was drafted. So he was there. Rich Eisen was there. I got to do JJ Watt's hair one year. That was super fun. He's very tall, very tall. Very, very short. So
I think you learn more in person just how tall
how
big, how
how
large they are.
big they are. Yeah, 100%. 100%. You know, we also, on the other side of that, we had Darren Sproles. And I remember meeting him, and I was like, "Holy shit, you must be so fast." Because he's not a big guy. Like, that was the other thing too. It's just seeing people in person, because it's all different on screen, right? Whether it's athletes or actors or whatever, everybody looks different on screen.
Right. No, oh my gosh, that's so fun that you got to meet everybody and got that experience. But as somebody who already played fantasy football and then immersing yourself in not only Hollywood, but in a fantasy football centric show, and then how did you decide that you wanted to branch out and become a creator contributor? I know that you saw this post from the fantasy footballers, but how did you decide and make that connection? Where did all of that click for you?
Well, I had always just, been so interested in it. And I remember like talking to people whenever you're starting to talk about it. I always had a lot to say. And I remember multitude of people would just be like, "You know a lot about this. This should be your job. You know a lot about this." And I was like, "Yeah, it's cool. Is it a job? I don't know." Right. And then one of my really close friends was saying to me, like, I was, talking to her, she was working on like a life coaching business and stuff like that. And I was telling her some of the other things I wanted to do with my life. And she's like, "You need to follow that. You're very passionate about it." And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't really know how to get started." And then pretty soon after that, I saw, they posted that they were looking for new writers. And then I called my friend. And before I was even finished telling her about it, she's like, "You have to apply for it." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "What's the worst that can happen? What? They don't call you? You never hear from them again?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a good point." She's like, "Yeah, you have to just do it. You have to just jump in." And I did it. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, fine, whatever. If they call me back, whatever." And yeah, that was like a big thing. It was just like, at some point, if it's something you want to do, you just have to do it. You just have to start. And everything kind of, like you were telling me your story, it kind of seemed like it domino effects, right? Like one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, but none of it would happen if you just don't start. So Yeah, so I got really fortunate. They called me back and they hired me, and I love working for them. They are fantastic humans. So
And of course, I mean, we all love them. Did your different life experiences, like as a law student, as a union member, as somebody in Hollywood, did that kind of help you prepare for this type of job? Or was it just your love of fantasy football that you're like, I'm just going to go do this? Or was it a little bit of both?
yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, look, I've been in the production world for a very long time now, and it's like you see all parts of it. And, this is a production, right? Whether you're doing it visually or writing or whatever. And I think I had a good idea of how the whole thing worked, which, when I'm doing like visual content, like I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what editors are going to look for, right? Like where you need to stop to make sure they, have a cut, or, I worked in reality TV for a long time. So that you're, repeating questions because you want to be able to cut around that, and just sort of things like that. And I think that gave me a good appreciation and understanding of like how the whole thing works. And, I've been alive for a while, so I think my years might have helped a little bit. Yeah, so I wrote a little bit for the CrossFit Games too a few years back, when they were doing Southern California Regional. So I had a couple of years where I got to work for them. So I got to see a similar sport in that sort of way. So I think that helped me as well.
So that's another thing that we haven't even touched on yet. Like you were an avid CrossFitter, and I'm just like, how do you manage all of your time
I don't
between
know.
CrossFit, between working on TV, your shows, your fantasy football content, watching, having a family? Like,
I
how
don't
do you
know.
manage to produce such high quality content with everything that you do? How do you manage your time to put
If
everything out like that?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, it's not like easy. I think you have to work to make everything fit in your life. But if someone said somewhere like, if it's important to you, you'll make time for it, right? And all of these things in my life are important to me, so I make time for it. I'm very, very organized. Anyone who knows me, I have my label maker actually right next to me. Like everything's labeled, everything's written down. Like I have multiple calendars. It's um you just have to stay on it. Like I'm good with my emails and blah blah blah. And that helps me have a sense of order. Um, you need that because otherwise it's like, I don't know, where am I going today? What am I doing? When's that due? And yeah, I utilize that. I write a lot down in my notes app. Like whenever I have anything, I just write it down because otherwise I'm going to forget it. And if I have it down, then I'm not going to miss it. But yeah, sometimes I'm very tired. Britt, I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes I'm tired.
I
But
think that realness is very important because this job is sometimes very draining. And I'm going to pull up this comment here. Who doesn't love a 70-hour
oh,
work week?
yeah, Howard knows what's up. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I'm fortunate to like my day job. It's kind of like this, right? So like I might go in the morning at 5 a.m. and I might be slammed for 2.5 hours getting people ready for set. But then I go to set and I can sit there for a while and I have some time to get on Twitter. I have some time to do other stuff. But it's about, I think, compartmentalizing and figuring out like where things are important and what order you need to do things in. That's super important. That's like something I feel like we learn when you're bartending, right? When you're serving, like who's most important? Am I getting this guy a beer, or am I checking on this guy's food, or like what's more important? But that carries on through your life, I think, is figuring out what order to do things in. So
Yes, let's multitask and have just a list of 20
yeah,
things in your brain.
yeah,
Um,
I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Yeah.
I always say that I'm going to take something away from my guest every single week. And as a very, very ADHD person, I'm going to take away having a notebook.
Dude, just write it all down on
Yes.
voice memos. Dude, I just discovered voice memos, and I know I'm late to the party since we're on like iPhone 45, but voice memos, oh my God, it's amazing because I have some of my best thoughts when I am driving, and I'm like, I'm not going to pick that up and write that down, but yeah, just anything.
I
Story
love
ideas.
it.
Yeah, in the
I
shower.
love that so
Story ideas
much.
in the shower.
I'm just going to maybe get like an AirPod and just carry it with me
Yeah.
at all times and just be like, you
Yeah,
know
just
what?
record it.
Just
Yeah.
have a random thought. Send myself voicemails like Lady Gaga did.
Yes,
And
there you go. There you go. You'll win that Oscar. 100%.
there we go. Let's get that EGOT. We're running out of time for it. Speaking of content though, and EGOTs and different types of media, what is your favorite kind of content to do? Do you, because you have been with Kyle Yates as well
Yeah,
on
yeah.
not just writing content for the fantasy footballers, but on Kyle Yates'
Fancy
website as
Football, yeah.
well. So what is your favorite kind of content to do? Like, is it writing? Is it podcasting? Is it radio? And how do you approach doing different kinds of media?
Yeah. It's so hard because they definitely have their pros and cons. And we were talking about it beforehand as a female, how different it is doing visual content than if you are a man. So it's like when we're on the screen, I can't really just roll out of bed and put on a baseball. I guess I could, but we don't necessarily want to do that. So there is a little bit more effort and stuff you have to do before you're doing visual content. But I do like that because it gives you the chance to, go off book, if you will. Like I really like to do like bulleted points and just kind of be like, these are the things I want to hit. And I'm just going to let whatever comes out of my mouth come out of my mouth and we'll see where it goes. And then I think writing is much more structured. I think it's like I try to put everything on the page and then I go back and I like pull out the fat, right? So it's like I start small on the visual, but I start big on the written. I don't know. It just works for me. I don't know. I think writer, like however you write, you have your process, right? Yeah, I enjoy them both and I enjoy them both differently. Yeah, I guess that's it. It's such a
No, it makes sense though, because depending on, well, from day to day, how you feel, um, especially on a specific topic. Like if you're
yeah.
very passionate about a specific topic, sometimes video media, you can just go on and on and on
Oh, yeah.
about it.
Yes.
Written
You can
media,
tell when I'm
sometimes,
passionate about something.
yeah, oh my gosh, it's sometimes I have to be like, especially on lightning round, I'm like, hey Kev, knock knock, can you just cut me off? Like,
Yeah, just stop
switch
me.
switch
I'll go
topics because I will take up this whole show on this entire topic. Writing, again, you can just kind of stop yourself, especially
Yeah,
if you have a good editor. Um, but there are challenges that come along with these different kinds of
yeah.
media, and you've been super successful. And again, I can't tell you how much I admire your work,
Oh my
but
god, you are the kindest person. Thank you.
I'm just, again, no lies. I'm just telling it how I see it. But
Like,
there are challenges that you face, especially with visual media when
yeah,
you're subjected to trolls, with written media, with people who don't even have a face behind uh their username. So what kind of specific challenges have you faced in your career, specifically as a woman in a male dominated field?
yeah, I mean, I think it's what we all face, right? It's those delightful comments that people write or say or whatever. And I remember like my first rude comment, I remember I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to screenshot that and send that to a couple people because, I was like, it's my first one. Yay." And then like I kept looking at it and my husband's like, "You can't read these. You just can't do it. I need you not to." And I was like, "Well, but," and he's like, "No, just don't. If it's constructive, that's fine. But, and what I mentioned it to you before, it's like the people who write just rude, shitty comments, just in general, to anyone, like they're not thinking about you at all. They write it and they close their laptop and they're off. And it's like we read them and then we're thinking about them and we're like, oh, well, maybe he's right. Oh, maybe that. And it's like that person doesn't give us any more time of their day. So why are we wasting our time on that? So I'd rather just take it out and not even look at it. And like, I mean, you're doing good work. I know I'm doing good work. I put the time in. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. But yeah, that's what you have to do.
No, it is. And I think that I remember very soon after I got started, I think I remember like calling my mom and just crying because I gave somebody the wrong advice and the wrong play, and they posted on Twitter and they're
Oh,
like,
that's the thing too. That's the thing with us too. It's like if we get a wrong take, which, let's be honest, this season,
nobody knows everything. No, if we did, we would be gazillionaires.
We would have the almanac from Back to the Future. That would be what would be happening. But it's like this season, especially, like, look, I told people to go out and draft Russell Wilson. I ain't gonna lie. I was stacking him with Courtland Sutton left and right. Didn't really work out for me. But it's like, don't get mad at me because a lot of other people had that same take. You know, people make mistakes. That's what makes this fun, right? Because when you hit on that, the one guy who said to draft Geno Smith is like loving life. So, you know?
And I feel like we don't get enough credit for the takes that we do get correct. It's the ones that we get wrong.
Yeah.
And Bender, here's a great comment. You know you're good when the morons start trolling you.
I love it. I love it.
And my sweet mama is also in the chat.
Aww,
and just says,
I love it.
since I mentioned that I called her, and she says you just gotta let it go.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks for reminding me. I appreciate you.
My dad's always like, where's that stuff you're writing? Can you send me that website? I'm like, yeah, Dad, I'll send it.
Yeah.
He knows how to get on YouTube, or any of this. Yeah, probably good.
And then just for some validation, card-carrying member of the I was wrong about the Broncos too. Same. I will confess, me too. We can't get everything right. It happens. That's just what we do.
Allen Robinson, so there was that whole thing. Yeah, we all
are we the same person? Because same.
Yeah, I had a lot of Alan Lazard. It's like the way I finished in my leagues, I was either, very, very top or very, very bottom. And it was just depending on like where I had my shares, right? Like Russell Wilson, Trey Lance, stuff like that, which I loved. And then
you can't. Well, and then you factor injuries in and things like that, not only on the skill position side, but on the offensive line, on the defense. Like there are so many different factors that contribute to you being wrong or right.
Yeah.
Like you just can't do everything. But we are getting up against time a little bit. So guys in the chat, I don't even know where time's gone because this has been amazing.
It was like done. Marvin Jones didn't hit. I love that. Mr. Scampers. Marvin Jones didn't hit.
Yep. Well,
did you see that Instagram post of him with like the Telemundo guy? Oh God, he goes nuts, like speaking Spanish and stuff. It's fantastic.
I did not. Oh, but I love it. I'm gonna have to look that up. If you guys have anything else in the chat, please throw in some questions. If you do, I'm gonna ask this one. Since this show is called HERstory in the Making, and it is about your story, not only about your past, but about your future, where do you see your story continuing? And what are some goals that you're setting for yourself? Or where do you ultimately want to end up?
I mean, I would love to be at a point where I can make my living doing fantasy football in some way, shape, or form, however that is, whether it's like content creation or working for a company, or maybe it's even working for a team or something like that. Like that I get fire when I'm talking about that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Like I get excited, like working on a Sunday would be enjoyable because it would be that, it's like working on a Sunday for other stuff. I don't want to do it. But that's what I would love. I would love to have that. I mean, again, I love my 9-to-5 job. I love it. I love the people. I love everything. But it's just, sometimes you want to maybe go do something else, see if that happens. Otherwise, I just keep doing both. And that's fine with me. I make that work. So.
Which I also love because, again, you are so damn good at it. And that, I mean, we love your work on both camera and off camera. You are an incredibly amazing person. Such a joy to talk to. Like, I'm kind of sad that this is over. Not kind of sad. I am sad that this is going to be over right now. So before we get out of here, if you can just tell everybody listening where to find you and where to find your work, and if you have any upcoming projects.
You can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Julia Papworth. Football funny stuff, all that sort of jazz. And I'm writing for the FF Ballers. So Fantasy Footballers, we're kind of, as the season comes to a close, I think everyone in the fantasy community is like taking that breath and just sort of relaxing for a while. So I think content in general is going to be a little quiet for a while, but it'll be fun to get back into like dynasty, rookie profile stuff. I had a great time doing that last year. So I'm really excited about that. And hopefully do some more stuff with the Fantasy Playbook. And that was a great opportunity this year to do for him as well. So I loved that. So yeah, check me out.
I love it. I cannot wait to see all your content, all your stuff that you've been doing. Julia, you have been an absolute joy. I can't say that enough. For everybody watching, if you are still hanging around on Club Fantasy in about 30 minutes, there is Who's Your Caddy, the golf DFS podcast with Kelly. And as somebody who knows jack about golf, let me tell you, she has really broadened my knowledge about golf. So you should go check that out, especially since football is ending. And for the degenerates, if you want to get into a little more gambling, but there's not really a lot more to do. In the next 2 weeks on HERstory, we've got Lauren Carpenter at Stepmom Lauren, who, if you guys have followed me on anywhere, was my Fantasy Football Expo bestie. Cannot wait to talk to her. And Club Fantasy Life does have HERstory in the making shirts for sale. Please go to the link in the YouTube description and buy them. And all of this money from the shirts does go to support scholarships for Laura Oakman's Galvanize to send women and girls to the boot camps to where they learn media training, how to learn to speak to athletes, basically training an entirely new generation of women in fantasy. It's a great cause.
That's great.
So excited. I love it. And Julia, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. We'll do it again. It's great.
Yes. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. All right. Well, guys, we're signing off. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.